My name is Rachel Morgan, and I'm 35 years old. I live in the quiet town of Brookhaven, where the streets are lined with maple trees and the nights hum with the sound of distant trains. I work as a freelance interior designer, a job that I built slowly over the years, room by room, client by client. From the outside, my life might look put together, organized, stable, even calm. But what most people don't see is the truth behind that calm. The years I spent bending over backwards, trying to earn something that should have been given freely, my family's love. I believed, for the longest time, that loyalty meant giving everything. Your time, your money, your energy, especially to your family. I thought if I just kept giving, if I stayed quiet, stayed useful, they'd eventually see me, appreciate me, maybe even love me for who I really was. But I was wrong. From the very first day I got my first real client contract after college, I started sending money home. Not just a little here and there, no. I was sending $3,000 every month, nearly 40% of my income, directly to my parents. They said it was temporary. They said it was just until the family business stabilizes. I believed them. And so, while my peers took vacations, upgraded their lives, or bought homes, I lived small. I wore the same shoes for years. I worked from a hand-me-down laptop that glitched every few hours. I skipped every holiday trip, avoided fancy dinners, and never once bought new furniture. All so I could send that money without missing a single month. Because they were my parents. Because I thought that's what a good daughter does. And still, year after year, I kept waiting for that moment. That one moment when they'd say, "Rachel, we're proud of you. Thank you for everything." But that moment never came. Instead, all I ever heard about was Emma. Emma was my younger sister, 6 years younger, to be exact. While I was quiet, careful, and responsible, Emma was everything I wasn't in their eyes. Loud, creative, impulsive, and loved. She had this magnetic energy that pulled people toward her, even when she left a mess behind. And there was always a mess. But my parents, especially my mother Janice, adored her as if she were flawless. If Emma made a mistake, I was the one cleaning it up. Financially, emotionally. If I made even the smallest slip, I was blamed for being careless. I remember once, when Emma shattered a window playing inside the house, I was the one scolded for not keeping an eye on her. When she crashed her first car, my parents replaced it like it was nothing. When I bought my first car with my own money, not a single word of congratulations. I was the one holding things together in silence. The fixer. The one they didn't see until they needed something. I told myself it would all be worth it. That maybe someday, when I had something special of my own to celebrate, the family would finally turn toward me. That they'd recognize the years I'd carried them on my back. I thought that moment would come when I got married. When I finally had a milestone just for me. But I had no idea that the real storm was still waiting. 2 years before my wedding, my parents made a decision that felt like a slap in the face, wrapped in a smile. They handed over our family's small home decor business to Emma. No discussion. No warning. No explanation. They just gave it to her like a prize for breathing. I still remember standing in the kitchen, the words hanging in the air like smoke. "We think it's time Emma leads the business," my mother said, beaming. I tried to keep my voice calm as I asked, "Is she even ready? She doesn't have experience. She doesn't know how to manage people, let alone finances." My mother narrowed her eyes and said sharply, "She has a natural eye. She just needs a chance." My father, Walter, didn't even bother looking up from the newspaper. I wanted to believe in Emma. I really did. But I knew her patterns. She never finished anything. She flitted from idea to idea, social media projects, art classes, a candle-making phase that lasted 2 weeks. She had no background in management or money. But I said nothing. I swallowed my frustration like I had for years and watched quietly as she took the wheel. And sure enough, the problem started almost immediately. Within months of Emma taking over the business, I started hearing whispers. First from old clients who used to call me directly, then from fellow designers at industry events. They mentioned missed deadlines, unreturned emails, and projects that seemed to vanish into thin air. Then came the late paychecks, employees reaching out to me discreetly, asking if I knew what was going on. Some vendors even called my personal phone, wondering why invoices weren't being honored. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that Emma was just adjusting. But deep down, I knew better. Legal notices began arriving at the business address. There were rumors of unpaid taxes, bounce checks, and shady bookkeeping. I couldn't sit still anymore. So I approached my parents, calmly, carefully. Something's wrong, I told them. Clients are pulling away. The staff isn't getting paid. Don't you think it's time to step in? My mother didn't even blink. It's fine, Rachel. You just don't understand how much pressure Emma's under. I almost laughed. Pressure? I had been working 12-hour days for over a decade, sending them $3,000 a month, skipping my own needs just to keep their lights on. And now, I was helping cover Emma's expenses too, without them even asking. But I bit my tongue. Again. I still visited during holidays. Still played the role of the steady daughter. I still hoped that maybe when it was my turn, they'd finally be proud of me. And that's when Leo came into my life. Leo was unlike anyone I had ever met. He was calm where I was anxious, steady where I was stretched thin. He worked as a documentary filmmaker, capturing real stories from around the country. His presence was grounding, like the world could be spinning around me, and he'd still be there, steady as ever. Where my family overlooked me, Leo noticed everything. He'd ask how my day went, and actually listen. When I was holding too much, he held it with me. I didn't have to earn his love. I just had to exist. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. We planned a small wedding. Simple. Elegant. Just close friends and a few family members. Nothing extravagant. Every dollar of the $60,000 we planned to spend came from my own savings, saved slowly, over the course of years. It was the first thing in my life that felt purely mine. A moment that wasn't about Emma, or my parents, or fixing anyone else's mistakes. Just me. Just us. And I was hopeful. Maybe this time, they'd support me. Maybe they'd show up, not just physically, but emotionally. But exactly 1 week before my wedding, everything shattered. The phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I smiled, thinking maybe she was finally calling about the wedding. "Hi, Mom." I answered, hopeful. She didn't return the tone. Her voice was flat. "Rachel, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" I asked, already bracing. "It's Emma," she said. "She made some decisions that didn't go well. We're in serious trouble. We need money. Now." I froze. My heart raced. "How much?" Her answer cut through me like a blade. "All of it. The $60,000. We need everything you saved for the wedding." For a second, I thought I misheard her. "All of it," I repeated, my voice barely audible. "You're doing well, Rachel," she said, like it was a compliment. "You've always been smart with money. And honestly, you wouldn't even have those savings if it weren't for everything we gave you growing up." Then she added quickly, like it would make it better. "We're not asking you to cancel the wedding. Just delay it. Prioritize your family. Just for now." I stood there frozen, holding my phone like it had turned into something venomous. "Mom," I said, my throat dry. "I've supported you for 12 years. I've sent you almost half of everything I've ever earned. I never asked for anything in return. Not once. And now you want the one thing I've saved for just for me?" There was silence. Then her tone changed. Cold. Sharp. "So now you're turning your back on us? On Emma? After everything we've done for you?" My lips parted in disbelief. "You've stood by Emma through every mistake, no matter the cost. I've always been your backup plan, your fixer, your solution." And then, she hung up. No goodbye. No apology. Just a deadline and a deafening silence. I stood in my living room, completely numb, my heart racing, my hands trembling. But I didn't cry, not yet. I just stared ahead, breath shallow, pulse pounding. But the next day, everything exploded. It was mid-morning. I was in my kitchen, still shaken from the call, going over vendor contracts and trying to figure out if we could still salvage the wedding plans. My head hurt. My chest felt like a stone had settled inside it. Then a loud, violent banging at my door. Before I could even move, the door burst open. It was Janice, my mother. She had let herself in with the spare key I'd forgotten she had. She stormed into my apartment like she owned it, her face red, her voice already rising. "You're going to let your sister fall apart?" she screamed. "After all we've done for you?" I stood up slowly, placing both hands on the table to steady myself. "Stop it," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore." She didn't listen. Instead, she stepped closer, fury flashing in her eyes, and then, without warning, grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked hard. I gasped from the pain, instinctively trying to pull away, but before I could, her open palm struck me across the face. The sound cracked through the apartment like a whip. My cheek stung. My scalp ached. My eyes watered instantly from the shock and the burn of it. And my heart had finally stopped hoping. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Not her daughter. Just someone who had disobeyed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at her and whispered, voice low and certain, "I'm done. I'm not your fixer anymore." She blinked. For a moment, I thought she might hit me again. But instead she spat the word, "heartless," turned around, and slammed the door behind her so hard the frame shook. I stood there for a long time, my hand pressed to my face, breathing uneven. My scalp throbbed. My cheek burned. But my mind? My mind had never been clearer. Something had ended. Something I should have walked away from a long time ago. And now, I was ready. That evening, when Leo came home, he knew something was wrong the moment he saw me. I hadn't even turned around yet, but he froze in the doorway, his duffel bag slipping from his shoulder. "Rachel," he said softly, crossing the room in seconds. His fingers gently touched my cheek. His voice shook. "Who did this to you?" And for the first time in my adult life, I told everything. I didn't leave anything out. The years of silent giving. The financial sacrifices. The emotional manipulation. The phone call about my wedding savings. The sudden visit. The hair pulling. The slap. The look on her face when she hit me, like I was disposable. I laid it all out like poison spilling from a wound. And Leo never interrupted. He just sat beside me, one hand holding mine, the other resting on my back as I shook and finally cried, not from the pain, but from the weight of all I had carried alone for so long. And when I was done, when my voice was hoarse and my tears had dried into my skin, he whispered something that pierced my soul. "They don't love you, Rachel. They love what you give. That's not the same thing." It felt like truth I had always known but never allowed myself to say out loud. Maybe it wasn't that I wasn't enough. Maybe it was that they never tried to love me without conditions. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in the quiet of our apartment and made a decision. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The next morning, I picked up my phone and called the only person in my family who had ever treated me with consistent kindness, Uncle Martin. He was my father's older brother, a retired corporate investigator who lived in Ridgeville, a small city 2 states away. He'd always been the odd one out, distant from family drama, but he had been the only adult who ever asked me about my dreams growing up. When I told him everything about the years of financial support, Emma's mismanagement of the business, the slap, the fraud suspicions, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that gave me a chill. "Rachel, I saw this coming a long time ago," he said. "I just didn't realize it had gotten this bad." I didn't call him for comfort. I called him for help. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what was really happening behind the scenes of Emma's business. Uncle Martin agreed, without hesitation. "We'll do this carefully," he said. And thoroughly. That was the beginning of something bigger. While he began requesting records and tracing the company's public filings, I focused on starting over. With Leo by my side, we made the move we'd been dreaming about for years. We left Brookhaven behind and relocated to Fairmount, a peaceful coastal town where no one knew our last names. We launched a new design studio called True North Interiors, just the two of us at first. Long nights, tight budgets, but clean work. Honest work. And while we were building something real from scratch, Uncle Martin was quietly pulling back the curtain on something deeply rotten. What he found changed everything. A few weeks later, Uncle Martin called me. His voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind every word. "You were right," he said. "This isn't just bad management. It's fraud." My hands went cold. "What kind of fraud?" "The kind that leaves trails," he replied. "I've reviewed the records you sent me, emails, payment confirmations, vendor complaints. I also accessed some public filings. Rachel, there are fake employees on the company's payroll. Names that don't exist. Payments going to ghost accounts. Entire identities created just to funnel money somewhere else." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. He wasn't done. She also took out business loans under fabricated project names. None of those projects were ever real, but the loan amounts were withdrawn in full. Some clients paid thousands in deposits and never received a thing. I sat on the floor of our new apartment, stunned. My chest was tight, and the papers Uncle Martin had forwarded were spread all around me. Bank transfers, email threads, forged invoices. I traced the fake names with my finger, recognizing some of the emails. Names Emma used casually. Lies I never noticed. And then came the final hit. "The company hasn't filed federal taxes properly in over a year," Uncle Martin said. "The books are doctored. The financial records? A disaster." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in silence and made a quiet promise to myself. I won't protect their lies anymore. While Uncle Martin worked behind the scenes gathering hard evidence, I focused all my energy on growing True North Interiors. I reached out to a few former clients of the family business, those I remembered as fair and professional. I didn't tell them who I was or how I was related to Emma. I just introduced myself as a new design consultant offering personalized, transparent, high-quality work. Within 2 months, 5 of them had signed on. They were relieved to finally find someone who returned calls, met deadlines, and followed through. No excuses. No chaos. Just results. Slowly, my reputation started to rebuild, not as Emma's sister, not as Janice and Walter's daughter, but as someone who stood on her own. And while my business grew client by client, Emma's world quietly started to unravel. Uncle Martin contacted a former employee, a designer named Sophie, who had been fired from Emma's company without severance. When she saw the documents Martin had compiled, bank statements, falsified tax forms, fake employee files, she didn't hesitate. She filed an official complaint with the Department of Labor. That complaint triggered the first formal investigation into Emma's business. Suppliers began cutting ties. Clients left angry reviews online. Industry circles buzzed with quiet rumors. And I said nothing. I didn't defend myself. I didn't respond to the bitter messages my parents started sending me, calling me ungrateful, cold, even cruel. Because for the first time in my life, I had no need to explain myself to people who never truly listened. As the investigation into Emma's company deepened, my business rose quietly, steadily. True North Interiors grew from 5 clients to 10. Then came referrals, clients who had been burned by Emma's overpromises and underdeliveries, now looking for someone they could finally trust. I didn't boast. I didn't advertise with flashy slogans. I just delivered on time, honestly, and with care. Leo stood beside me every step of the way. He handled communications, designed our branding, and reminded me on hard days why we started this. Soon we hired a part-time assistant, then a junior designer, then a full-time project manager. But while our small company thrived, the headlines began to surface. One morning, I got a message from an old classmate. It was just a screenshot with a headline. Emma Delaney, owner of Delaney Designs, under investigation for tax fraud and employee complaints. I didn't reply. I just stared at the image, then turned toward the window of my office. Outside, it was raining in Fairmount. People walked past holding umbrellas. The town moved on. So did I. Soon after, Emma was served a court summons. Fraud. Tax evasion. falsifying employment records. She faced hearings, massive fines, and the likely shutdown of her business. My parents didn't call me. They didn't apologize. Instead, they sent bitter emails laced with guilt and anger. You betrayed your family. Do you really want your sister in jail? After all we gave you? But I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have the words, but because for the first time, I no longer needed their permission to breathe. One crisp morning, a handwritten envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. Inside was a short note, just 4 words. We were so wrong. I stared at it for a long time, not because it moved me, but because it didn't. There was no real apology. No accountability. No acknowledgement of the slap, the manipulation, the lost years. Just a last-ditch attempt to pull me back into a fire I had finally escaped. I folded the note and placed it in the same drawer as her last letter. I never opened it again. 2 weeks later, I received another update from Uncle Martin. A former client had filed a lawsuit against Emma for breach of contract and damages. Thousands of dollars had been paid, and nothing was ever delivered. Emma was being sued again, this time publicly. Everything was falling apart, and none of it came from me yelling, fighting, or seeking revenge. I simply stopped covering up their lies. That alone was enough. Months passed, and then one quiet morning, after a long stretch of normal, my world changed again. I was standing in our bathroom, staring at a small test blinking back a single word. Positive. I laughed before I even cried. Then I walked out to the kitchen where Leo was pouring coffee. He looked up, saw my face, and froze. Are you serious? He whispered. I nodded, and the smile that spread across his face nearly shattered me. 9 months later, I held our baby boy in my arms. Tiny, warm, breathing in my scent like he already knew me. We named him Caleb, and as I looked at him, I whispered something I had longed to hear myself. You'll never have to earn love. You'll never have to buy it. In that moment, I knew. I hadn't just broken the cycle. I had burned the whole script and written a new one. One built on truth, on love, on freedom, and it was mine. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey, please take a moment to like the video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you believe in stories about justice, healing, and personal strength, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life inspired stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching, and always remember, you deserve peace, and your story matters.